Good afternoon, Huskies, and welcome to the January installment of our online professional development workshops. My name is Joshua Prue, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at the UConn Office of Alumni Relations, and I'm going to be your moderator today. On behalf of the UConn Foundation, we're excited for today's discussion. Today's presentation will be featuring Sandra LaJeunesse of Odyssey Consulting. But before we begin, I have a few areas of note to help you manage your webinar presentation today. There will be an opportunity to ask questions, so please feel free to utilize the question box on your control panel. As you think of them, type them in, and we will try to get to as many as we can throughout the presentation. The second is that you all have access to a handout that will be utilized during slide 10 of this presentation. Please use your control toolbar and access the handout section there to view the document and participate accordingly. Number 3, a survey will be sent to you as a follow-up email. We'd appreciate it if you could fill out that survey so that we can continue to bring you the types of webinars that you're looking for that can help enhance your careers. The fourth is that we will be recording this webinar, so please visit our YouTube page following the presentation, most likely next week, at youtube.com/UConnAlumni. Sometime later this week, we'll get that uploaded, and you can download that at your leisure. Number 5, lastly, be sure to check out our events calendar for upcoming webinars and events in your area at UConnAlumni.com/events. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter. Sandra LaJeunesse is the founder and partner in Odyssey Consulting, which is an organization development consultant with demonstrated expertise working with all levels of management and employees in developing the human competencies critical to business success. She has solid assessment, coaching, training, facilitation, and design skills. Sandra provides leadership coaching development, new leader assimilations, career coaching, consulting, and facilitation of groups on the human dynamics of change and transition, assists with conflict management, enhances effective communication and building exceptional teams and workplace cultures. And Sandra conducts organizational assessments, focus groups, collects 360-degree feedback data through probing interviews and designs, and facilitates retreats. She partners with leaders and teams to design and implement strategies that maximize performance, productivity, ownership, and personal satisfaction. Sandra honors the worth of each individual, facilitates collaboration, and achieves results vital to organizational success. Uses many applications of the Myers-Briggs type indicator to promote an understanding of diversity, of style, and productive change. Sandra's work has been in diverse environments ranging from large corporations to small businesses, to not-for-profit organizations, and in a wide variety of industries. Prior to the past 18 years with Odyssey, her experience includes 8 years as a senior consultant with the world's largest publicly traded international human resource consulting firm, primarily coaching individuals through career transitions and assisting companies managing change. Organizations credit her with initiating change, energizing and supporting individuals and teams in realizing set objectives. Her expertise in identifying latent potential and designing and delivering interventions that develop individuals and groups has positively contributed to the overall growth and performance of her clients. Sandra holds a master's degree in counseling psychology and a bachelor's in education with a strong emphasis in adult learning styles. And she is also Myers-Briggs certified. Sandra, what a mouthful, what a history. On to you.
Thank you, Josh. That was quite a mouthful. But of course I enjoyed it. Hello, fellow UConn alumni. I'm delighted to spend some time with you today talking about the human dynamics of organizational change based on William Bridges' model of transitions. Our workplaces and the whole world, and even our personal lives, are going through so many changes, it seems, these days. I started researching this topic in the late 90s when I worked for an international human resource consulting firm that was focused on career transitions when companies were doing a lot of reorganizing and downsizing. And people were losing their jobs. And at the same time, I was experiencing a significant personal life transition. So the whole topic really intrigued me. I always thought transitions were like muddling through till you got to wherever. At the company I worked for, we coached people who had lost their jobs, yet found that the people who were left behind, who had retained their positions, were reeling from all the internal changes that were going on. So we started working with them to help them normalize their feelings in response to organizational changes so they could kind of honor the past and refocus for the future. We worked with leaders to help them understand what people were going through on a real human level. So it was not saying this is the change, this is the new strategic plan, just do it. Because a lot was happening inside the people that worked in these places to prevent them from just staying focused on that. I'm also, as we speak, going through a transition, and I think of transitions as kind of a departure of everything that's familiar, because all of my work in delivery is with human beings that I can actually see out in front of me and around me. So this is a separation from a familiar way of doing my work and a familiar way of knowing my competence. So I can empathize with all of you. So here we go. So our hopes for this session is, one, to understand the predictable phases of transition based on William Bridges' model, which I've used for years. And at the end, I have some links to a few of Bridges' videos on the different phases. I think he explains them really well. To identify the typical human and organizational reactions to each phase of transition. We don't just muddle on through, although that's what people feel like, but I think it helps to know what phase we're in, what happens in that phase, and what are helpful behaviors and mindsets and strategies to help us through the phase. So this is the next one, to learn strategies that assist in managing the stress and anxiety that's inherent during times of change so that we can refocus and increase our effectiveness. Then I'd like to ask you at the end to commit to at least one new behavior that will help you deal more effectively with change in your workplace or in your life. You know, I think coming to these learning events is great, and unless we do something very practical to apply what we've learned, then it's not so great. So I'm going to ask you, what's changed for you over the last year? And I know there could be millions of things here, but we're limiting it to 5, and we'd like to ask you to respond. So a totally new job or additional responsibilities, a new boss, a member of your team leaving or a new team member joining, your organization's been acquired or is merging, or number 5, a sense that you're not being valued. So where are you?
There's a poll on your screens right now. If you can please just participate in that by selecting which one best fits for you. All right, Sandra, I'm going to be putting the poll onto the screen for everyone to see. We have a totally new job or additional responsibilities weighing in at 31% of the audience, a new boss, 14%, a member of your team leaving or a new team member joining, 17%, your organization has been acquired or is merging at 26%, and a sense that you're not being valued at 12%. We had 93% of 45 people and attendees participating.
Great. That's a lot of change going on out there. And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge exactly what the change is.
Sandra, your slides have fallen off your screen. If you can throw that back up.
How do I do that, Josh?
That PowerPoint down on the bottom, right down there. Yep, click that, and then to the right. To the right.
Thank you. Yep.
There you go.
It's important to realize that change and transition are two different things, and often we use those words interchangeably. So change is this specific event that happens. So, you were told you were getting a new boss. You were told that a team member was leaving. You were told that your organization was being acquired or merging. That's the change. It happens pretty quickly. And almost immediately, there's a separation of a familiar way of knowing ourselves and our environment. And we usually experience a time of disillusionment, disenchantment, and disengagement. So the change happens, and then we move into this transition, which is an ongoing process where there's a gap in the continuity of our existence. We're neither where we used to be or where we expect to be. We're in this in-between state. Some people with religious backgrounds tell me it must be like what purgatory is. Outwardly seems empty. We're not sure where we're going. That's why people describe this as kind of cloudy place, or I'm feeling, a vice president recently told me, I really feel muddled here. Because the most important work goes on inside of us. We're recalibrating how we look at ourselves, how we look at the people around us, and how we look at the world. So transitions aren't quick. Changes are. But then this ongoing process really takes a while, where we need to find meaning and comfort in this new situation we're in. And you can even think about personal changes in your lives and how you will go through these same stages. So we all react to change differently. So if, your organization is merging or has been acquired, some people may be excited, thinking about more possibilities. Some people may be scared to death, thinking about they're going to lose their job. And then all kinds of emotions in between there. And we're different. We have different life experiences. Who knows what kinds of changes and transitions we've been through before. Our values may not be aligned with whatever is changing. Cultural backgrounds might give us a different way to look at it. There are gender influences. Males and females react differently. Then, of course, within the female group and the male group, people react differently. And our personality style, even looking at introverts and extroverts. Extroverts may talk about what's going on a lot more, where introverts might be keeping a whole lot inside. So I think it's important to have this generosity of spirit for ourselves and for the people around us as we go through transitions. Transitions are not easy. Stage of life is another one. Younger people who are in their 20s have a very different reaction than people who are in their 50s. We are indeed all different. So here's kind of a picture of the process. First of all, the process itself is like an emotional roller coaster. We're going to be thinking and feeling different things maybe every day, and that's okay. We do move forward. I think paying attention to the suggestions William Bridges has for each of the phases helps us process where we are and move forward in a less stressful and painful way. But all of these kinds of questions and feelings are normal. And I think a lot of times people think something's wrong with me. then I'm feeling anxious about it, or I'm really scared, or this is a big threat, or I'm feeling guilty because all these other people lost their jobs and I'm still here. Disillusionment with the organization, because oftentimes the plan that's laid out at the beginning will change. And I think that's pretty typical. If you took 10 steps from where you're seated or standing now, everything would look different. So I think as we move into transitions, we see different things and we make modifications. And that doesn't mean anything's wrong with us or the organization. It just means we're paying attention. This is one of the quotes I like. I collect quotes on change and transition. So all changes, even the most longed for, have their melancholy. But what we leave behind is a part of ourselves. We must die to one life before we can enter into another. The Chinese have their word for change is a combination of their words, threat and opportunity, kind of joined together. Because there's both. Transition can be a threat and it can be a great opportunity. And I think this happens even when you've chosen the change and it's a good change. If you've chosen to move someplace, if you've chosen a new, more responsible job, you've got a promotion, if you've had a new baby, your life will never be the same as it was before. So we're leaving behind a part of us. Here are Bridges' 3 phases. So the first is an ending. Anytime something changes, something ends. So every change begins with an ending, which is loss. And in our culture, we don't honor losses. You know, in some cultures that are more emotionally healthy than ours, we give people time to mourn losses. They give people time to mourn losses, and we don't. We kind of say, oh, have a stiff upper lip and move forward. This is not a big thing. We experience outer losses and inner losses. So you may have lost somebody in your organization or several people in your organization. And so the outer losses, they are gone. The inner losses are, you're not sure for you who will take their place. Who do you call for what? How can you develop trust? How can you trust these people are going to get you what you need? Now, I always think it's a separation from the familiar, a familiar way of knowing ourselves, a familiar way of knowing our environment. And oftentimes people can go through a period of disillusionment, disenchantment, and disengagement. And that's normal. You know, smart leaders set up strategies to help people re-engage, to process some of these feelings, to put them in some kind of structure, because we're going to be talking about it all day. So why not have a meeting every morning for 10 minutes so people can talk about how they're doing in this ending? And then it leaves people freer to do the work at hand. So endings really aren't that pleasant. But then we go into a place that's even more difficult. Bridges calls it the neutral zone. People that I've worked with say, why did he call it that? It's anything but neutral. It maybe should have been called the twilight zone. So it's this in-between time with nothing solid. You're neither in a place that you used to be in, and you're not in the place you're going to be in. So there's lots of confusion and uncertainty. People think of this neutral zone as being chaotic. We don't know exactly what to do. We don't know which way to head. We don't know who to trust and who not to trust right now. So we go through a period of questioning and exploring. And yet, because it's so miserable, it's the most fertile place for creativity. You know, when things are going smooth and things are going fine and the status quo is being maintained, we don't come up with great ideas as frequently as we do in the neutral zone, where we're not feeling that happy. The neutral zone usually lasts longer than anybody ever expects it to, mainly because we have to change the way we see things. It's a paradigm shift inside of ours, switching the way we look at ourselves, we look at other people, we look at the organization, we look at the world, we look at our families. It's the major work is done inside of us. And eventually we get to a new beginning. This place where there's more of a sense of comfort, confidence, and familiarity. We're beginning to feel realigned, like we know what's going on, and revitalized. Now, I don't have a question for you to answer here, but wherever you are out there, raise your hand if you know this neutral zone place from any time in your life. I think it helps for us to have a common vocabulary. People in organizations that I've worked with say to each other, I'm really in the neutral zone today, where formerly it was a bad place to be. I mean, who is not supposed to know exactly what they're supposed to be doing at any given time? So I think part of what this does for me is normalize these stages. And so I'm not as hard on myself. And it just knowing the phases lessens my stress and anxiety of thinking something must be wrong with me. Here's what it looks like if you like a graph. So the ending is the bar on the left-hand side. That's the change. And you move into an ending. The ending can take a long time or it can take a short time if you're down here at the bottom. Then you get into the neutral zone. But what you can't see much of is this new beginning. It comes in slowly and you keep seeing more and more and more of it, but it's little by little. So it's hard to believe in this new beginning being something good when we really can't see or imagine it well. That's why leaders need to be able to keep, as people get a bit through the neutral zone, keep painting a picture of this new beginning. What will it look like? Who will report to whom? What will our responsibilities be? What will the structure of our day look like? What kind of technology will we be using? So over on the left-hand side of the screen are the impact points. Now we think this is, you know, have a stiff upper lip and move forward, but look at how we're impacted. We're impacted around relationships. We're impacted around turf, and I'll explain what these mean in a minute. We get impacted around structure, control, future, and meaning. So I have a lot of empathy for people going through transitions, which is most of us at any given time. I think it's really important for us to understand what's ending for us. The more we can put our finger on it and talk about it to people in a safe environment and with people that we trust, the healthier we'll be going through these times. So there are endings around relationships. Maybe we're feeling less connected. There's not a feeling of camaraderie. We're not familiar with each other like we were before. We can lose around turf, so we lose maybe the roles and responsibilities we once had. We could lose our physical space. Oftentimes people lose their sense of importance. I had a job that I knew well, I knew who to call for what, everybody would come to me, and now I have these new responsibilities, like how important are they going to think I am? And it's around ownership and competence. Then we can be impacted around structure. So we can lose what we knew about systems, some tasks, procedures, priorities, objectives, and then inside the sense of internal order and familiar patterns. So some things happen on the outside and some on the inside. And as we move forward, it's like, what do I need to do to have more a sense of being organized, this internal order? How can I make patterns that become familiar with me? Control is another one. We knew what was in our control in the old way. Now we're not sure about what's in our command, what choices or decisions are ours and what aren't. What about our sense of influence? You know, if I had a boss that I really could influence a lot, that really respected my opinion, and I have somebody new now, are they going to feel the same way? If I'm merging with another company, are they going to value me the way I have been valued? Then the future. So what's happening to the specific plans I had? Long-range projects, my direction, it could be career direction in general or in the organization. Just my hopes and dreams of how I thought my future would be. Often ends. You know, this is what I thought, this is how I thought I would progress. But I'm so disillusioned with this industry or what's been happening that I just need to change directions, but I have no idea how. And then the meaning. So what is this all about? Why did this happen? Why the change? Do we really understand what it's all about? And do we believe that it will work? So a lot of times it can challenge our personal identity, our beliefs, our values, our faith. So there in your toolbox, there is a checklist on how are you impacted by change in your workplace right now. To assess yourself, because I think we need to know what is the change and then how are we impacted. So use the toolbox to let us know what impacts you the most.
So far we have a response from Laura saying that she has a clear sense of priorities.
Or she wants a clear sense of priorities.
Don't be shy, everybody. The question toolbar should just be on your right-hand side of your screen on the toolbar. Go ahead and type in your response.
For some reason, if you're not seeing it, here is the list on the screen.
Sydney says a sense of power or control over my own destiny.
Yeah.
Lila says relationships with people I work with. Carrie says relationships with people I work with. A sense of connectedness to others. Melissa says a sense of ownership where I work and a clear set of priorities. Again, for those joining us late, there is a handout section on your toolbar. If you'd like to download the handout that is currently on your screen, you can do that as well. Danica says a sense of personal identity and satisfaction in my work. Stacy, a clear set of priorities. Tiffany indicates knowing what I don't want. It seems the organizations don't uphold their missions, value statements. They only say things or funding for funding and not valuing the customer. Kim says a sense of power or control over my own destiny. Control or influence over specific people or processes from Frank. Sandra, while we wait for a few more to come in, there was a question that came in about 10 minutes ago. The question was surrounding, what if your CEO or your new CEO is enacting changes that are clearly detrimental to the business?
Yes. And that often happens. And I think if there's a way that you can give the new CEO feedback about that, through focus groups or sending a note in a positive way. But most of the time, unless a lot of people think that way, and the CEO has instituted focus groups to collect a sense of what's the climate here, how are people feeling about this, and that's part of the disillusionment. So I wouldn't make any sudden moves. I would wait to see how it plays out over the next few months and then make some decisions. Are the new values so not aligned with who you are that you can't work there anymore? Are there ways or departments you could work in that might seem more aligned with what you value?
So only a couple more responses here. The first one from Marianne, a sense of power or control over my own destiny. Ryan says a sense of personal identity and satisfaction in his work. And Colleen says understanding the rules of success in our own workplace.
Yeah, identity. So, I mean, this goes to show how we're impacted in a lot of different ways as we go through change, and it's different for all of us. I mean, lots of people mentioned, you know, the relationships, you know, the people, the sense of being connected, a sense of importance. Under the structure, you know, I heard people say, kind of the power and control, what's mine, that can go under familiar patterns and also under the control. The clear sense of priorities is so discerning to people. A sense of ownership. You know, we want to go to work and feel good about what we do and feel like we're contributing to something more than just the job that we do. You know, the clear sense of priorities again under structure. All these things have changed significantly. And even, even the question about, you know, the organization's values, like what's this all about? Does it merge with what I believe? So we have a lot to discern during this time. And I often will tell people, don't make any rash decisions, because how it looks at the beginning is not going to look like that a year down the road. You know, even in our personal changes, think about a major change that you've been through years ago and how you felt about it at the very beginning. And looking back, how does it feel now? I know I was working with a group in a hospital that had been acquired by another hospital. And one of the women there, I mean, all of the managers was just so disappointed and just outraged by the whole thing. And one of the women in the group said, you know, her husband died when he was young and she had 4 kids. She didn't have an outside the home job. He took care of all the grocery shopping, all the paying of the bills. She didn't drive. He would drive. Everything he did, and he dies. And so she's left with her children. And she said, I thought at that time, I thought it was going to be the end of us. I just couldn't imagine how I could take care of these 4 children and myself because I never learned how to do any of this stuff. And I said, and so now you're a manager in this hospital. And she said, I never would have imagined it in a million years. And never would I've chosen that my husband would die. But I learned so much in the process. And now I look at it as sort of a gift. So that's why I think it's important not to make any rash moves, to keep watching and talking to people and see if you could get more information about priorities, you know, get more information about your roles and responsibilities so you know how much control and power you have. Connect with people. And oftentimes during times of change, we move away from people. In one session I had managers talk about these things. What were they feeling? And had them report out. And at the end of it, one manager said, I can't believe everybody believes in similar ways. I thought like I was the only one having these issues. But people tend to move away when they're going through transitions instead of moving closer to other people and talking through some of these issues. As long as it's in a contained space, don't do it all day. Make meetings for 10 minutes every morning. Some companies or some teams will have a 10-minute stand-up meeting while people are getting coffee and say, how's it going for you today? And they talk about these kinds of things. So a lot of these things happen in the neutral zone. You'll see them. The most important thing is the 4th bullet point. Communication's diminished. We start moving away from each other. We're not talking. Even if we're talking and explaining things, if you're telling me something, I have a million things on my mind. I'm worried about my personal identity here. I'm worried about clear sense of priorities. So what am I supposed to be doing? And so I'm not hearing what you're saying. Lots of emotions come up, go down. There's usually fear and anxiety. It feels chaotic, this neutral zone place. We're losing faith in the organization because we're thinking, well, they didn't plan this out well. And yet, significant changes have to feel chaotic. Because if the change wasn't significant enough to change what should be changed, and people wouldn't feel any different. People go through this inability to decide. There are power struggles because there are gaps. There are some things that nobody's doing. And it really is, if people look at what are the gaps and say to somebody, I'm going to start doing this, you can develop a whole new competency. Because we're not talking, we're making assumptions about people, so mistrust blossoms. There's less risk-taking because people are afraid. We don't want to stand out too much in this neutral zone. We just want to play it safe. Playing it safe kind of adds to reduced commitment. We have low energy. Most of the time we go home, we're exhausted because we've spent all of our energy worrying. There's poor morale and teamwork because we're not connecting to the other people we work with. We tend to blame others, and that connects to the power struggles. You know, if I'm feeling threatened, I might not do this consciously, but I might blame you for doing something wrong, so I would look better. People tend to look for leaders to answers, and oftentimes they'll say, leaders seem less visible. And I'll ask people why. they think that's the case. And people tend to say they're probably in the neutral zone too. I mean, it's a human dynamic. It doesn't matter what your title is. We go through the neutral zone. And yet, this is the most fertile place for good ideas. So there are exciting possibilities. We're not going to think up new ideas when everything is running well and we're like maintaining the status quo. We're going to think of new ideas when kind of we're not too happy. So organizationally, these things can happen. Conflicts overshadowing progress. Work quality is typically reduced. Work quantity can be reduced or erratic. Time and energy devoted to personal and emotional reactions. That's why I say have a stand-up meeting in the morning so people can talk about and start connecting. What's their reaction to all of this? Inefficiencies can develop. There can be a potential loss of employees who are saying right off the bat, I don't want to deal with this, even though the eventual outcome might be a good one. And there's less creativity, innovation, and risk-taking. This is my favorite of all quotes for change and transition. Managing transitions is a hands-on, dirty, sweaty, humanity-filled, emotionally laden, risky process. It puts your skin in the game. And I think life and work is messy sometimes. And I think change is messy. And I think the whole world is going through change. So we're getting it from lots of different levels, and it can be quite stressful. Yet, I think it helps to know that this doesn't mean anything's wrong. This is, on a human level, what we do for the most part when we go through change. I'd like you to think of a previous significant change you experienced earlier in your life. So go back at least a year. I mean, we don't live for any length of time in our culture without experiencing some change that we did not choose. And even if it was a change that you chose, we still go through the neutral zone. We still go through the process. So I want you to think of that change, and then briefly, what qualities or strategies helped you survive and maybe even thrive? You're still here with us, so the change didn't get the best of you. Think about that change you experienced, and think about yourself. And what are the qualities or strategies that helped you survive and maybe even thrive? And I'd like you to tell us about those qualities or strategies in yourself. And use the question box to reply.
A willingness to flex from Rachel. Steve says, understanding why the change is being implemented and what I can do to make the most of it. Ruth says, life happens one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, one breath at a time. You can always do that. Rachel says, self-awareness and emotional self-regulation.
Yeah.
Tiffany says, changing my attitude. John says, solid work ethic and personal drive. Carrie says, reconnected with old friends when I moved for a new job. Doing what I knew was right, from Frank. Colleen says, positive attitude toward new opportunity. Carrie says, ask a lot of questions at the new job. Marianne says it's about strategy. Focus on the small parts you can change in any given day. And Laura says, about focusing on the sure things and take challenges one at a time.
Yeah. Those are great. Those are really great responses. So no wonder you've all been surviving changes. Keep these strategies in mind. A lot of them are ones that I have as strategies. You know, and I want to get back to what you said in a minute, but I want to look at this resistance to change. It's really not positive or negative. And I think when we first hear about a change, we tend to resist it. I don't want to do that. Everything, I like being in my comfort zone. You know, I think it's okay to stay there for a while. Then I think we need to summon up the courage to try something new or different, to pull one of these strategies that we've used before out and see how it will make a difference. You know, I like Frank's response of doing what is right. And I think, you know, being connected to our own values is the only rudder that we have as we go through challenging times. Get clear, and I've been doing more and more work in workplaces around this. What do we value as individuals? And then what are our shared values? And then what are the behaviors that demonstrate these shared values? So the whole group kind of has a code of conduct of what they believe is right in terms of their workplace culture. But I think that do what is right. Stick to what our values are telling us. Use our values as a rudder to navigate us through the multitude of changes in our organizations and our world. You know, we can get stuck in this poor me victimized mentality, and I think that's okay for a while. Some horrible things do happen, and I think it's okay to feel like a victim for a while and process that, and then say, okay, do I want to stay here for the rest of my life, or do I want to, you know, pull myself up by my bootstrings and make the best of this, or leave? You know, no matter what happens, we can always decide our attitude to the circumstances around us. You know, there's a book, Man's Search for Meaning, who Viktor Frankl, who came through Nazi concentration camps. Not that I'm equating what we deal with as his experience there, but he came out to be this well-known psychologist, and he believed that people could take everything away from us except our ability to choose our own attitude. And I think that's important. How are we going to look at this? Are we going to look at all the negative stuff right now, or are we going to look at what we value about where we are in the organization, or the things the organization does that we appreciate, or the people that we're connected to, or the people we will be connected to? You know, I think it comes down to what's in our control. There are millions of things in the world that aren't in our control. And I think the more we focus on those few that are in our control, then the more influence we have over the people around us.
Sandra, if I can jump in real quick. We are about 10 minutes to the hour. We realize that folks have a very busy schedule, so we just want to make sure that you realize that there are a few more slides to get through here. About 4 or 5 left, but we want to make sure that we're conscious of your time as well. Please note this will be recorded, so if you do need to jump off, you can jump back in here when the video is posted to YouTube, youtube.com/UConn Alumni. And if you have any final questions that you're thinking about as well before you take off, if you have to take off, feel free to enter those in the question box, and we'll try to answer those even if you're not here, so that when you jump back in, you'll get the answer to your question.
Thanks, Josh. These are just a few strategies to use during times of change through each of the phases. So in endings, and we already talked about this, so this is a review. Identify what's ending and what you're losing, and grieve for how it used to be in a safe place with somebody you trust. A hospital once, a small community hospital that was being acquired, they decided as a whole organization, because it was in one community, lots of the family members were born or died there or had their life saved there. So they decided that anybody that did not have to be in the hospital at that time would form a big circle around the hospital and give it one hug. And they had photographers up in other buildings taking pictures of that. And some people thought it was kind of goofy, yet there were tons of people out there giving this hospital a hug. So I think it was just a good ritual to mark that ending. I think it's important to give and receive support in letting go. You know, and a lot of you talked about connecting to people. Look for stability. What's staying the same? Usually it's not everything that's changed. And learn these phases of transition. Know what to expect. Normalize the confusion typical of the neutral zone. As one person said, take one breath at a time. Ask lots of questions. Keep communicating. It's like the most important thing. Here's the neutral zone, that really murky place where chaos reigns. Let's focus on what's in your control and encourage others to do so. Emphasize short-term objectives and temporary structures. I worked with a department in an insurance company where 1/2 of the department lost their job. So 50% now of the people had to do the work of everybody. They set up half-day temporary structures. So they'd meet in the morning for 10 minutes. They would decide what had to be done by lunch, who would do what. They would go away and do it, come back. They agreed that they'd all take at least a half an hour lunch and go walk outside when it was good, kind of adhering to the energy kind of method of intermittent recovery, that if you stay at something and stay at it and stay at it, your effectiveness is going to go down. If you take a break and do something very different and come back, you have more energy to deal with it. So their temporary structures started a half a day at a time, and then went to a day at a time, and then went to a week at a time. And they used this temporary structures model to do that. Another thing in the neutral zone is give yourself and others the benefit of the doubt. Demonstrate generosity of spirit. You're all in this together. Remember how competent you are, and keep talking to each other. That neutral zone will take a long time. It'll be a while before you get to a new beginning where everything feels familiar again. But keep communicating there too. And really, when you get there, you'll be going through some other kind of ending. So I think in this day and age, we all need to learn this well. Most of you said these things, so I'm not going to go over them. you know, push to understand, and somebody said this, the why and what of the change. Be flexible. Go with the flow. Do everything you can do. Hold on to your solid work ethic. Reconnect with old friends. Make new friends. Right. Every step of the way, do what you believe is right. These are the areas that need to be rebuilt as you go along. The parts that were impacted. So how do you rebuild? Relationships, turf, structure, control, future, and meaning. Until we find a space that's familiar and comfortable, which is that new beginning. So, in closing, this is the quickest. So not only do I always do these in person, but I always do them for much more than 1 hour. So I'm really like in transition. But I want you to know, if you have more questions and concerns, feel free to email me. You know, either one of my colleagues or I would be happy to get back to you by email or to schedule a brief 20-minute discussion at no cost to you. We think it's really important that people understand how to deal with change and transition in organizations. It's not easy out there. So here's my contact information. Here are some short videos, like 2 to 3 minutes, and you'll see William Bridges. It's his model. So he's talking about his model. He's the expert. And it's been a pleasure to be with you today. Even though I can't see your faces or see your body language or hear your tone of voice or see your eyes, I hope this has been valuable for you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. We do have a few questions that have come through at this point, so if you want to just leave your contact info up on the screen real quick, we'll do that really quickly. So as Sandra mentioned, feel free to reach out to her, obviously, if you have follow-ups to this or other questions. Before everybody jumps off as well, we will provide the slides to you in a PDF form, so you can not have to worry about writing everything down. We'll make sure that that gets to you, as well as the YouTube video link. Some of the questions that have come through, this is from Frank. My company is constantly changing in leadership and organizational structure, bringing in personnel from the outside of the industry to fill senior positions. Any words of wisdom for this constant state of turmoil?
I would like to, and I don't know how comfortable you feel, I would like to give some senior people some feedback about that. See, as an outsider, I'm always more comfortable doing that because I can't get fired from my full-time job. I'm just a consultant. But I'd want to say, what is the effect of this on your people who have been here for years, who hold the knowledge? Why are we always going to outside people? Why aren't we doing succession planning and developing the people who are already inside? That's what engages people. So I really want to give senior leaders feedback in a constructive way. And I know that would take a lot of courage and willing to take a risk to do that.
Next question comes from Alexandra. If you're trying to manage change for others, how do you help pull your people out of the neutral zone into where they feel happy and confident again?
You can't hold people out of the neutral zone. The neutral zone, I think, if we skip the neutral zone, the change doesn't work well. I think it's helping people understand where they are. So in ending, so this is what we're going to have to do now, at least for the next month. And to say it may be hard. Neutral zones can get confusing, but I'm telling you that ahead of time so we can talk about that. We can meet more often. We can talk every step of the way, what's confusing. You can tell me about what's scary for you or what you worry about or areas where you might feel incompetent. But I don't think we can keep people out of the neutral zone. I think it's a real important place to be, even though it's no fun.
All right, next question comes from Rachel. In addition to Viktor Frankl's book, can you recommend a few more leadership and management books to help?
Why don't you email me so I can think about it? Email me, so I don't know if you want them only about change or about leadership and management books for other things. So why don't you email me and let me know what your interests are, and then I'll get you some names of books.
All right, that's all the questions we have at the moment. Sandra, if you don't mind going to that last slide now real quick. So before we let everybody go, we want to make sure you're aware of the next webinar or online professional development workshop that we have in the pipeline. It's utilizing or optimizing your personal growth using the Enneagram. As you can see, there's some information up here. We'll be joined by the Director of Youth Programs for Leadership Greater Hartford, a nonprofit community leadership program here in the state of Connecticut. Many of you are based in Connecticut and are familiar with Leadership Greater Hartford's work. It is basically a form of, if for those of you that are familiar with Myers-Briggs and the DISC assessment, very similar in process to basically help you enhance your working relationships and collaboration techniques. So hopefully you all can join us. That will be on February 14th. We realize it's Valentine's Day, but your love of your life is your alma mater, so you should be able to join us at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, and you will be seeing a email from us shortly with a survey as well as a link to register for that as well. You can find that information as well if you don't get that email for some reason at uconnalumni.com/events. If you have further questions for Sandra, please feel free to email her or contact her. We want to thank you all for taking this time in your day to join us again. We want to wish you all a great weekend as it comes forward, and we hope to see you all in February. Thank you so much to Sandra again, a proud alumna, and for all the great insight and information today.
Thank all of you. Thank you, Josh, and thank all the participants. It was a pleasure.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next month.